In this video, we're gonna talk about constraining. And as initially stated, we've already covered how would you go about not only kind of rigging this arm so you can create this type of movement, but now I'm going to show you the technique that you would use to actually have the mechanical arm lift the box. Okay, and constraining, what it does is that it's you're relating the in a way parenting the not only the position and the rotation of an object based on another object, but the difference between constraining and parenting is that the constraining you can actually turn off and back on rather than being constant, the way unlike the way that we have for a mechanical arm. So the idea here is that our mechanical arm is going to travel to this point, come down, lift, close those claws, and at this point is going to lift it up, take the box, leave it here, drop it, and leave it in place, and then it'll go back to its original position. So again, if we're to do this with parenting, it'll follow along the whole time. So we're going to be using something called parent constraint. So to find it, make sure you're under your animation mode for Maya. Alright, and again, if you are under another mode, you will notice that a lot of these menus just change for you. We're going to be looking at the constraint over here. So I'm just going to separate this box and just keep it right here for myself. The next step that I want to do is pretty much figure out at what point the these claws kind of close on the box that's going to be lifting up. So I'm going to select one of the claw control, and I can figure out that it's somewhere between 42 and 45 where it needs to stick to this. Okay, so in order to establish the constraint or this relationship, I'm going to select, unlike parenting, in which you select the child first and then the parent and then your parent, you're going to select the one you want to constrain to first and then the one that's going to follow along. So I'm going to constrain to the wrist control. Alright, so I want to select the one that's going to be guiding the box first and then the control for this box afterwards. Once I have this selected, I'm going to go here to my constraint tab and I'm going to click on parent. Okay, you're going to notice that something just happened to a channel box here, and all of these attributes now have a blue coloring rather than the red one that happens when you set up a keyframe. Alright, the next thing that you should notice if you scroll through your timeline is that it's pretty much parented the movement of the box throughout the whole thing, through the whole animation. Alright, so again, this is not the way we want it to be. In order for us to be able to turn on and off this constraint, we need to set a keyframe. We need to set a keyframe at the point where we want it to be constrained to the control of the wrist. Okay, so since I want it to start at 42, I'm going to go ahead and, while having the box selected, alright, because that's the one that has the constraining on right now, I'm going to click on S. And one thing you're going to notice once you go into the channel box is that now you have what was blue, now it's green. It also sets keyframes for the scale and the visibility, but you also have a new attribute called the blend parent. Okay, now and this happened because you kind of have to set up a keyframe for I guess the rotation and the position of where you want this object to start. Now since we've done this, the initial parent constraint that we created has kind of it's no longer active, and now we have this new blend parent that we're gonna have to kind of turn on and off by setting keyframes between 0 for off and 1 for on. Okay, so the way we're gonna be doing this, and again, it's different from everything else that we've done as far as setting keyframes. Rather than pressing on S to set a keyframe on everything at this point, I just want to set a keyframe on the blend parent, and I can do that just by right clicking on it and then clicking on key select. Alright, so now that one's going to be red because there's a keyframe kind of assigned to it. Alright, so as stated before, when it's at 0, it's off. So it's not going to be constrained to the wrist control unless we turn it on. Alright, so it needs to happen any point before frame 45. So at frame 42 it's off. I'm just going to turn it on at frame 43. Okay, so I'm going to switch this to 1. Alright, now this tends to work a little bit better if you have your auto key on. Alright, so just kind of keep in mind that if you change this to 1 and then right click and key selected, it might not work very well for you. So if you for this part, just make sure you have your auto key turned on. Alright, so from 0 to 42 it's going to stay in its place, and then starting 43, any point after that, it's going to follow on the parent on the object that it was constrained to, which was the wrist control. Alright, so from frame 43 to frame frame 87, it needs to be constrained to this wrist control. Alright, so at this point, once it gets to this point, it needs to be turned off. Okay, but so what I'm going to do here, alright, I need to do two things, but let me show you why I'm going to do it in the following order. I'm going to turn off the blend parent at this point. Okay, now what you're going to see is the object's kind of snapping back to its original position. Alright, so, and again, this is not correct, and the reason why it's doing that is because we initially had to set up a position keyframe for the object to remain in this point before the constraint was turned on. Now we need to set a keyframe for the position and rotation at this point before we turn it off. Okay, so to do this correctly, at frame 87, once the object is on top of the box, I'm going to set a keyframe for this to stay on at 87. At 88, alright, I'm going to press S on this control that it's parented, that the box is parented to, and it's going to set a position and rotation keyframes for it to remain at this point once I turn it off. So again, at 87 I set a keyframe so the parent constraint is still on. At 88 I'm going to set a keyframe for everything by pressing S, and then I'm going to click on the blend parent 1, change that to 0. That way it's going to stay in place after the claw has left it in this platform. So what it leaves us with is with an animation of the mechanical claw lifting the box from one side, carrying it to the other one, and then leaving it in place. Okay, so this lesson concludes on how you go about using parent constraint to basically have the claw move it from one side to the other one and then leave it in place. On the next video, we're going to look into the curve editor so we can play around with the animation and give it more appeal.